Never let a good crisis go to waste. Winston Churchill's famous quote is as apt in the era of COVID as it was when it was uttered during World War II. Nations are using the pandemic and a potential coronavirus vaccine to gain greater power and influence. China and Russia in particular have been using their vaccine candidates to form closer ties with nations and test ties with the West. More than a dozen countries have signed deals with China to test one or more of the 5 vaccine candidates being developed there, while Russian officials claim to have provisional orders from some 50 countries for 1.2 billion doses of its Sputnik V in the next year. And analysts argue these arrangements could bring more nations under the thumb of Beijing or Moscow. I spoke earlier with the director of Griffith University's Asia Institute, Professor Byrne. So how exactly do these interactions work? Is it quid pro quo? We'll give you vaccines, you give us what exactly?
So we're seeing a couple of different things. We're seeing some countries really race into the game to develop and deploy that vaccine, and also to use the leverage that they might be able to gain with other countries around the globe. And we've seen a couple of nations, China and Russia, have been particularly active in this space. And it's not clear, I don't think there's any single set formula. It's not clear what kind of arrangements they're entering into. And I think we'll have to look at how delivery of a vaccine might actually translate into political outcomes, whether that might be in the South China Sea, for example, or in other parts of the world. I think we're really waiting to watch and see what actually unfolds here.
And what do you make of the particular nations Russia and China are targeting?
Well, I think it's no surprise in many ways. I mean, Beijing in particular is looking to its region and, has a case to say that it wants to be ensuring access for developing nations around the world, whether that's in Africa or in Southeast Asia. But I think you can also attach some very strategic intentions to some of these relationships. And in many ways, some of the vaccine development and deployment plans align, for example, with China's strategic outlook to develop links and connections around the world through its Belt and Road initiative, for example.
I wonder if we're being a bit cynical here. It could be argued that these governments, that China and Russia, are simply being kind, that they purely have altruistic motivations.
There's nothing altruistic in geopolitics, I think, and every nation will be thinking about its own self-interest and strategic objectives in the world, particularly now when we see our world as a much more contested place, where influence does matter and where there are much greater divides and fault lines right across the world. So, China and Russia are not the only ones involved in this game, but they're certainly the front runners. We're also seeing countries working together through the COVAX mechanism to try and ensure that they might be able to pool investment and take a portfolio approach to the development of a vaccine that will not only, hopefully, achieve a faster outcome, but also will ensure a much wider, more equitable access for countries right around the world. And Beijing, China is a part of that project as well.
Well, at the same time, the US has sort of withdrawn from the international COVID collaboration, allowing for China and Russia to gain greater sway. For example, the US pulled out of the UN's COVAX program to help developing nations get access to vaccines. How significant is the US pulling out of this geopolitical game?
Well, it is significant. I think that we've seen the US really retreat from a number of big international arrangements over the last couple of years. So it's no surprise in some respects that the US has not been in this game. It is a problem, and I think where China and Russia might be leading the way in some respects, the US is not even in the game. So I think that does have some real implications for US leadership in our region, the Asia-Pacific, as well as globally.
And how do you think global power dynamics might look post-COVID? How significant and long-lasting might this geopolitical wrangling with vaccines be?
I don't think we'll ever see the world order as it was, to be honest. I mean, the world has changed significantly. COVID-19 has amplified a lot of that change, but these are changes underway, and that the shifting nature of power, the strategic dynamics that really reflect that changing nature of power are here for time to come. So I think we have to prepare for a very different world, and that's important from an Australian perspective in thinking about how we advance our interests, how we commit to assisting the nations in our region, in Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and the Australian government has done that. But I think we are going to have to be really clever at how we operate in this very different world, in a post-COVID world and well beyond. And we will see levers of competition and cooperation at play at the same time. So we need really good diplomacy in this space, and we'll need to be really thinking through very carefully what this race for a vaccine is going to look like and what it means for us and for our part of the world.